Studying but not seeing results. This is probably one of the biggest pain points that you can experience as a student if you're actually putting in the hours, putting in the reps, studying every day, going for many tuition classes, but you're not seeing the results. And in this video, I want to break down and diagnose why this happens to many students and how to actually get out of it. Now, for some context, I wrote a book called Study Less, Score More about 2 years ago. And up to this point, it has gotten about 400 plus sales and people reading it. And we have received many good comments about it. And I've also took on a couple of students and with their parents on consultation calls and really spoken to real life students to figure out what exactly it is that is stopping them, or you in this case, from doing well even though you're putting in the effort. And I've come to the conclusion that everything just comes down to two things. And the two things are, number one, how hard you're rowing your boat, and number two, what boat you are rowing. Stay with me on this. Number one is how hard you are rowing. And I believe that if you're watching this, you are someone who puts in the hours already, right? But at the end of the day, we got to quantify how much hours you're actually putting in, because people say that the longer you study, the better your grades are, right? That's not true, but I believe that there is definitely some sort of elemental truth to it, right? Simply put, the more hours you spend doing something, the more volume you are able to get out of the task that you're doing, right? And with more volume comes more practice, and with more practice comes more skill. So even though volume does not necessarily cause better grades, but there's definitely a positive correlation between these two, right? I'm not saying that there's causation, I'm saying there's correlation, right? So number one, we got to quantify how many hours you're actually putting in on a weekday basis and on a weekend basis, right? You just need to ask yourself these two questions. On a typical weekday without CCA, and on a typical weekday with CCA, how many hours am I putting in? And then on a weekend, how many hours am I putting in? Now, I'm not living your life, and I also don't know what things you're going through in your life, but just as a ballpark for myself, right, I can only speak from experience for this. On non-CCA days, I typically spend about 4 to 5 hours studying, and that is after school, not inclusive of school. So after school, I stay back after school and study, and then come home at night, I study myself, right? And on CCA days, I typically spend about 2 to 3 hours studying. Okay, so just take it as it is, right? That is my standard that I set for myself, because my CCA typically in JC, let's say for example, I end school about 1, my CCA starts about 4, and then I end about 8 or like 9, and then I still have to travel home. That takes another hour, right? So very little time to study on CCA. But on the weekends, I strive for 8 to 10 hours of study. And it's very possible if you wake up early and you don't waste your time scrolling on social media, right? So first thing is that we got to quantify how much volume you're actually putting in. And the easiest way is to just count the number of hours you're studying and set a standard for yourself. Now it brings me to the second point, which is what boat you are rowing. And the boat that you're rowing is actually your study technique. How you're actually approaching each individual subject based off the nature of the subject itself and how it's actually being graded, right? There's definitely different approaches from content-based subjects to application-based subjects, right? The way you study for chemistry, the way you study for biology is vastly different from the way you study for math, right? The way you study for English is vastly different from the way you study for math. So it all comes down to how you're rowing your boat and what boat you are rowing. So I cannot say much for all subjects because I'm not a subject expert in every subject. But what I can say is for math, for application-based subjects, right? Like math and maybe a little bit of chemistry, right? And even things like physics, right? I took triple science when I was a secondary school student as well. What I can say is that for application subjects, how you allocate your time needs to be an 80-20 split. 80% of the time you need to be actively applying. That means doing test papers, doing questions, doing specific question types that you know you're weak at. And then the 20% is where you actually go and revise your content. I see students having it completely the other way, right? You have 80% of memorizing, creating notes, beautiful notes, right? Creating like massive piles of papers, right? And not actually practicing. And then the 20% you just do your TYS. Most students got it completely flipped around. You need to be applying most of the time, because it's only through applying and spaced repetition that you actually remember your concepts, and you also get to apply them and learn the fine nuances of phrasing your words in the exam context, right? And as long as you fix these two things, you know how to row your boat, how far you're rowing your boat in terms of hours, and what boat you're actually rowing in terms of study systems, things will completely change for you. We are 9 months away from O levels, 10 months away from A levels. To all students watching this, there's still time to fix. January has passed already. Don't let February go to a waste. With that said, I wish you all the best for your exams. If you are looking for math tuition classes, WhatsApp this number over here and I'll send you my classes details at my math tuition center, and let's have a chat over there.